We all grew up learning specific things about money. If we were careful, frugal, responsible, even lived below our means, we would be okay. Maybe not rich, but comfortable enough to feel secure. For a long time, that made perfect sense. What's confusing now is that many people are still living that way, yet money still feels incredibly heavy. Being careful doesn't bring the same sense of safety it once did, and there never seems to be quite enough room to maneuver. When the outcome doesn't match the effort, it's easy to assume you must be missing something crucial. But this isn't about needing more discipline or budgeting harder. It's about the fact that one of the core money rules many of us relied on quietly stopped working. Until we understand this, it's very easy to blame ourselves for something that isn't actually our fault. This fundamental shift is precisely why our financial lives feel so messy, even a little disorienting for many. It's not just that money feels tight, it's that it no longer makes much sense. You examine your habits, your spending, your lifestyle, and think, I'm careful with money. I don't spend recklessly, and I try to make responsible choices. And yet, there's this constant underlying feeling that there's no real cushion, no room for error. When something unexpected inevitably arises, when the outcome doesn't align with your diligent behavior, your brain instinctively starts searching for the mistake. You wonder what you missed, or why other people seem to have it all figured out. That's where the shame begins to creep in, not because you've done something wrong, but because the rule you trusted didn't deliver on its promise. In this video, we'll uncover the silent breakdown of this old financial rule and reveal a new approach that truly creates peace of mind. I've spent years deeply contemplating and discussing these very challenges with individuals navigating difficult financial seasons. My insights aren't just theoretical. I've personally experienced periods where there was absolutely no financial breathing room. If you've ever been there, you know how profoundly that impacts your sense of safety and security. So, what exactly changed, and why isn't it widely understood? Most people didn't suddenly making bad financial decisions. What truly changed was the everyday cost of simply living a normal life. Housing became significantly more expensive. Credit cards, once reserved for emergencies, subtly transformed into something people relied on just to get through the month. Major purchases like cars quietly crept into payment ranges that previously belonged to mortgages. At the time, none of this felt reckless. It felt reasonable, necessary, like adapting to the evolving realities of life. Because these changes happened so gradually, people adjusted without truly noticing what they were sacrificing along the way. It's a bit like the story of a frog in a pot of water. The temperature rises slowly, and by the time you realize what's happening, you're already in boiling water. That slow, insidious shift is what broke the old rule. Once too much of your income is already committed to fixed expenses and past decisions, being careful no longer creates safety. It simply means you're constantly managing an immense pressure. This is often the point when people start using the word overextended, and I approach that term with caution. It can sound like a character flaw, when most of the time it truly isn't. Most individuals didn't intentionally set out to overextend themselves. They didn't make one dramatic decision that blew everything up. What happened was much quieter. More and more of their income became tied up in things that felt normal and reasonable at the time. Once you find yourself in that position, being careful no longer feels empowering. Instead, it feels like something you're perpetually managing, often without much hope that things will actually change. That's when you start hearing people say, or perhaps even saying to yourself, I'll probably always be in debt, or this is just how life is now. Let's delve into what locked in truly means, as this explains why the old rule fails in real life. It's not always about someone having too much house or too much car, though those situations certainly occur. A lot of the time, those payments made perfect sense on paper. People followed the advice they were given, stayed with guidelines, and did what responsible adults were told to do. The problem is that once those payments are locked in, they don't budge. When a large portion of your income is committed to fixed expenses, everything else in your budget has to work around them. You can cut back on takeout, meticulously shop for grocery sales, cancel subscriptions, and plan meals down to the last detail, but the numbers that matter most simply won't move. That's when being careful stops creating safety. It's not because people aren't trying, it's because the parts of the budget that cost the most are also the least flexible. Living this way takes a significant toll on you over time, and it's something people don't discuss nearly enough. When there's no breathing room, every single decision carries more weight than it should. You second-guess purchases, mentally replay money conversations with your partner, and there's a persistent, low-level anxiety running in the background of everyday life, even when nothing is technically wrong. That is utterly exhausting, especially for people who are naturally careful and attentive. Careful people don't ignore money. They think about it constantly. And when all that effort doesn't bring any real relief, it's easy to start feeling discouraged, like you must be missing something that everyone else has already figured out. That's usually the moment people draw the wrong conclusion. They assume they need to tighten their belts more or try even harder, when what's truly happening is that the rule they were following no longer fits the reality they're actually living in. I want to share my own experience here because it doesn't look exactly like what I've been describing, and I don't want to pretend that it does. My family and I were never overextended in the traditional sense. We didn't have a big house or a car payment, and we didn't even have credit cards for a very long time. Not because we were exceptionally disciplined, but because our credit was so poor that no one would give us one. In the early 2000s, I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 boys, one with severe special needs, trying to make ends meet on a very small income and digging out of a house foreclosure. We still live in that same house today. That season taught me firsthand what life feels like when there is absolutely no room to breathe. There wasn't anything left to optimize or cut. Every dollar already had a job before it even arrived. When something unexpected came up, it didn't feel stressful because we'd made bad decisions. It felt stressful because there was simply nowhere for it to go. That's why I'm always careful when I talk about people feeling broke. Sometimes it's about being overextended, sometimes it's about locked-in expenses, sometimes it's about low income, caregiving responsibilities, or life simply being heavy. The specific situations may look different, but the emotional experience is often the same. When there's no breathing room, everything feels incredibly fragile. So, when I consider what actually works now, it's not about tightening your grip or trying to be more disciplined. It's about creating more breathing room, and I don't just mean in your bank account, although that certainly matters. I mean breathing room in your energy, in your time, and in your mental load. Breathing room is what absorbs shock. It's what allows you to handle surprises without immediately spiraling into panic. It's the calm people mistakenly assume careful spending is supposed to provide. When breathing room becomes the primary goal, the way you approach frugality naturally transforms. It becomes less about doing everything perfectly and more about protecting the parts of your life that actually keep you steady. You start simplifying instead of squeezing. You put more focus on the things that are locked in rather than obsessing over every small variable expense. That shift makes a far greater difference than trying to be stricter ever could. Being frugal isn't wrong. I myself am frugal. The purpose, however, just isn't what it used to be. If any of this felt familiar, I truly hope it brought you a little relief. Not because it fixed anything instantly, but because it helped you see that you're not alone in this, and you're not broken for feeling the way that you do. Being careful still matters. Budgeting still matters. Paying attention still does. But the goal isn't perfection anymore. It's about having enough breathing room so that money doesn't feel so heavy all the time. Because when you stop trying to squeeze everything as tightly as possible and start making decisions from a place of steadiness instead, money stops feeling like something you're constantly fighting. It begins to feel like something you can live with. And that shift matters more than most people realize.